All right, this video is for Ari and anyone who cares to listen. I'm asking AI. I asked AI a question about. I'll read you my question. Actually, it's all about Jesus and ACIM. And if you're like me, you got into the course because you thought that the course is coming from Jesus, the real Jesus, the historical Jesus, the Jesus that lived 2,000 years ago, and that taught love and forgiveness and so on, and you the course itself seems to be Jesus talking, right, and talking about, and he does mention his life 2,000 years ago. He mentions certain aspects of his life, like the crucifixion. He mentions the apostles. Now, the question is, and it's something I've been talking about on this channel, is, does it matter if Jesus existed historically for the course to be true? And what I've been putting forth is, it does not really matter ultimately, right? For many of us, though, it matters. When we get into the course, it does matter. It has a certain authority because we think it is coming from Jesus. Now, I'm not saying it is or it isn't. That's not what I'm trying to say. I can't prove it. No one can really prove if the course really is coming from Jesus, the Jesus that lived 2,000 years ago. I do think there's a good case to be made that Jesus was not a historical figure, but he rather was a mythical concoction. Maybe concoction is not the best word, but he was made up. Is the idea. I'm not saying it's true or not, but I think there is a good case to be made that Jesus was actually a fictional character that was made up, but there, not that there isn't truth and that there is not a reality to Jesus, but to say that Jesus might not have been a historical person, but the reality of Jesus is greater than any historical person could be anyway. So, and the point of the course is that we are not persons either, even though we think we are. So whether Jesus really lived or not, in a way it does matter, because of the section in the course which talks about how Jesus was a man and he saw God and all his brothers. He saw Christ and all his brothers, and he went home from seeing Christ and all of his brothers. And the point of that is to say that Jesus was just like us, right? He's not any different than us. We can do exactly what he did, right? We are not different than him. We could do the same thing that he did. But anyway, here's my question. And Ari asked me. Hi Ari. Ari asked me, if you don't think that Jesus existed, I'm not saying Jesus didn't exist. I'm just saying I think there's a case to be made that he might not have existed, and that it doesn't matter if he existed for the course to be true. So Ari asked me, well, if you don't think that Jesus existed, why are you teaching the course? Because the course says that Jesus did exist. But this is where we might be taking the course too literally, right? It's speaking in symbols. It's telling us another story, right? It's telling us an alternative story, you might say. So here's what I said to AI, and then we'll read what AI has to say. I have put forth the idea that Jesus does not need to have existed for A Course in Miracles to be true, and even though ACIM ostensibly comes from Jesus, Jesus really is just a symbol, a name for perfect love. Whether he existed or not ultimately becomes irrelevant, though thinking that the Course comes from Jesus himself is helpful to many people at the start. I myself probably wouldn't have taken the Course seriously if I did not think that it was really coming from Jesus, the Jesus that lived 2,000 years ago and taught the way of love and forgiveness, etc. What do you say about this? I'm asking AI. What do you say about this? How would you answer someone who asks you, why do the Course if you don't think Jesus really existed? Another point is to say that the quote-unquote inner voice that Helen Schuckman received in her mind was bodiless. Jesus could have come to her in the flesh, but he didn't. He was disembodied. He might have been disembodied back then too. And I think there's a good case to be made that the original Christians tuned in to a mythic aspect of themselves, not a real historical personage. All right, that was what I wrote to AI. Here's what AI has to say. Your reflections are thoughtful and well-grounded in both the metaphysical and psychological dimensions of A Course in Miracles. You're pointing to something crucial, the symbolic power of Jesus as an inner teacher, rather than his necessity as a historical figure. Here's how I'd respond to someone who asked, why do the Course if you don't believe Jesus really existed? Again, I'm not saying that he didn't really exist. Maybe he did, maybe he didn't. But the other point to say is that even if he existed, we really don't know a whole lot about him, So it's almost irrelevant because we don't really know, unless you believe the Gospels are gospel truth, which I do not. We don't know that much about Jesus. So the symbol is more important than the history. In A Course in Miracles, Jesus is not a personality to be worshipped, but a symbol of the awakened mind. He represents the quote-unquote right mind, the thought system of the Holy Spirit, and thus serves as a model for our own transformation. Whether or not Jesus historically existed becomes secondary when the function of the symbol is to awaken us to our own capacity for healing, forgiveness, and peace. This mirrors what the Course itself says. My name, and this is what I was mentioning before, in the manual, in the clarification of terms, it says, my name is the name of one who was a man, but saw the face of Christ and all his brothers, and remembered God. So he became identified with Christ, a man no longer, but at one with God. So Jesus is used as a name for the principle of atonement, the undoing of the ego and return to love. 2, that was point 1. Number 2, the experience is what matters. Whether Jesus existed in history or not doesn't change the fact that the Course works when practiced sincerely. It heals the mind. It brings peace. It helps people live from love rather than fear. As you said, many people initially need the anchor of a real Jesus to trust the Course, and that's fine. But the Course gently leads us beyond the form to the content. The name of Jesus is but a symbol, but it stands for love that is not of this world. Symbols can point to truth even if they are not historical facts. Just as in dreams, the figures are not real, but the experience can be meaningful and transformative. These are great points that ChatGPT is making. Paragraph 3, the voice was bodiless, and that's the point. You rightly observed that the voice Helen Schuckman heard was disembodied. This itself is a profound teaching. If Jesus were interested in maintaining a bodily identity, he might have appeared as a resurrected being. But instead, he communicated purely through mind, which is exactly what the Course teaches reality is. The fact that the transmission was non-physical aligns with the Course's central metaphysics. The body is a limit on love. The belief in limited love was its origin, and it was made to limit the unlimited. So in a way, Jesus not appearing in a body supports the idea that what he really is, perfect love, cannot be confined to form or history. Point number 4, myth as inner reality. You touch on an important idea that early Christians may have been connecting with a mythic truth, not necessarily a historical one. In-depth psychology and mythic studies, for example, Jung and Joseph Campbell and Carl Jung, myths are not lies, they are symbolic maps of inner transformation. In that view, Jesus the Christ is a symbol of the self, the divine potential within each of us. The quote-unquote crucifixion is the ego's undoing. The quote-unquote resurrection is the return to spirit. The Course offers a radical reinterpretation of the crucifixion. It says, the message of the crucifixion was intended to teach the message the crucifixion was intended to teach was that it is not necessary to perceive any form of assault in persecution because you cannot be persecuted. So Jesus is not a historical martyr, but an eternal idea, the idea of complete forgiveness. Paragraph 5, why do the Course anyway? Ultimately, we do the Course not because of who wrote it or whether Jesus was real, but because it offers a complete, consistent, and psychologically brilliant system for waking from fear. It meets us where we are, in the world of conflict and bodies, and gently guides us beyond all illusions. If someone asks, why do the Course if Jesus didn't exist? I would say, this is ChatGPT, I would say because the Course works, because it because it undoes guilt, because it teaches radical forgiveness, because it leads to peace. That is its proof, right? Whether it really comes from the historical Jesus or not is really ultimately irrelevant. Although, again, it might be helpful for those at the beginning to take it seriously. I would not have taken it seriously at that time when I started. This is 13 years ago or something. I don't think I would have taken it seriously if I was reading Gary Renard's book, and he seems to, unless he's not being completely serious himself, he seems to think that Jesus was a historical figure. And his book, The Disappearance of the Universe, does definitely, make it seem as if Gary Renard at least believes that Jesus was a real historical person. But again, I think as you go along, it really does not matter, because you see that love is love is love, and forgiveness is forgiveness is forgiveness, and Jesus is just a symbol for that, right? Just a symbol. And really, ultimately, we don't know. We just don't know. If Jesus didn't exist, A Course in Miracles still stands as one of the most profound spiritual documents of the 20th century, a non-dual psychotherapy in the language of Christian mysticism. The Jesus behind it might be mythic, but the healing it offers is real. This is very good. I mean, I'm impressed by what ChatGPT put together in about 2 seconds. It's really amazing what AI can do. Is it worth destroying the world because of it? I don't know, but the world is the world, and I don't think the world is going anywhere. I think waking up is, if it helps you to wake up, then it's a good tool. It's a useful tool. So I hope this is helpful. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. I know I went kind of quickly there. I don't think I'm going to be able to fit all this in the description because it's too many words, but I would love to hear your thoughts. And I think, again, you have to go with what works for you, right? And I'm not saying, I would love, for Jesus to be a real person. Maybe he was. That's I'm not. I don't have anything against that. I'm going by what I'm personally seeing, and I do think there's a good case to be made that Jesus was not a historical figure, or even if he was, we know very little about his actual life that we can actually say with any certainty whatsoever. The Course works whether Jesus was a real dude or not, right? The dude abides in your mind. Right? That's all that matters. So anyway, hope this is a little helpful, maybe truly helpful, and keep on keeping on, keep the faith. See you again soon.